Hello, and welcome to another one of my recordings. Through this recording, I want to cover the concept of arrays in Java, and hopefully this could help a little bit with what we're covering on arrays. Okay, first of all, so that I'm sure you already know that an array is one-dimensional array, which is all we discuss in this class is essentially nothing but a table with one column. I went ahead and put these numbers in there because we refer to an array through an index, which is always a whole number. And array elements in Java start with array 0 or index 0. So if your array has 10 elements, then the elements that you can actually access are going to be 0 through 9. So in Java, when you see a statement like int bracket bracket num equals new int 10, you're saying that you're creating an array with 10 elements. So the 10 is actually the number of elements, but the range obviously goes from 0 to 9. And that's just the range of the index. And again, this is just one way of creating an array in Java. So again, this is your array name. So if I create this statement in Java, essentially all we're doing is we're creating this array and we can refer to these with these indices. So if I name this array num, then I could issue a statement like num sub 0 or some num bracket 0 equals 50. And all this does is, by the way we read this is num sub and then the index 0 is 50. So this is one way of assigning values to arrays. So I just put 50 right there. And then if I have another statement that says num sub 1 is equal to 92, well then 92 goes here. So this is how we populate the contents of an array. The only thing you have to make sure you do is not to exceed the array element or the upper bound of the array index, which in this case is 9. Of course, this is words, so it's capitalizing the first letter, so this is what we want to do. And it doesn't really matter, I suppose, here. So let's go back to this program. So this program just creates the array. And what I want to do is these are just some local variables that I've defined. And what we want to do is I want to ask the user to essentially enter a set of numbers and populate this array. And now the rule here, of course, is that because we don't know how many items we're going to have the user enter, we could use a sentinel value. In this case, I'm saying enter a whole number to save into the array. To stop, enter 0. So 0 would be my sentinel or ending value. Now, if you wanted to, you could actually ask the user how many numbers they have and then have a loop that goes from 0 to that number. But this is yet another way of accepting input in Java. So n equals input.next int, because you all have seen this, and all it does is just creates or not creates, it allows you to read whatever the user enters at the keyboard and put it into this variable n. I is just, I'm using a variable to keep track of my array index. Of course, these could be anything you like. And here's the loop. I'm saying so long as n is not equal to 0, that's my sentinel value, num sub I equal to n. So this user just put in a value. Let's say I put in 52. Well, 52 is not equal to 0, so num sub 0 equals 52. So essentially all I did was I put 52 there. Again, that's just I'm just going through the input that I'm assuming the user is going to put in. I is now 1, so that means moving on to the next index. And then I ask the user to input the number. Notice how I have to read the data in both places right before the loop, essentially to prime the loop or find out whether this user wants to continue or not. And then inside the loop, you have to continue reading it because it's not going to go outside of the loop. So if I read the next number and let's say I put in 93, well, it goes back in here, and 93 is not equal to 0. So num sub I, now notice I was 0, now I is 1, so num sub 1 equals to 93. So as you can tell, I'm just populating this array. Let's say the next number is a 5, the next number is 43. And then let's say I'm tired and I don't want to enter any more numbers. I'll just put in 0 to stop the code or to stop the loop essentially. So let me go ahead and I've already compiled this. I'm just going to run it so you can see. And it says essentially it's telling me what I told it to tell me. Enter a whole number, so I'm going to put 52. And then I'm going to put in 93. And I'm going to put 5 and 43. And this is where I want to stop. Remember, I could put in a maximum of 10 numbers because remember the array was initialized to have, or was created to have 10 elements. So in this case I only have 4, so that's perfectly fine. When I press 0, of course here the loop is going to terminate because 0 is equal to 0. So when I press enter, the control is going to go to this line of code, and it's basically created this variable called n items, which is just the value of I, which is in this case n items is going to be 4 because I have 4 items. And notice I'm just going to print it. This is always a good idea to print the contents of an array. When you print the contents of an array, you can't just refer to the name of the array. You always have to refer to its index. So be very careful because a common mistake is to say something like print line num without the index, and then of course you get an error message. Notice this is just a simple loop that j starts as 0. I display num sub 0. Go back, j is 1 because j incremented by 1. Num sub 1, num sub 2, and notice I use less than and not less than or equal. So if I have 4 items, you know that I'm only going to have indices 0 through 3. So as you can tell, this loop essentially displays all the numbers on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and run it, and then I did some other stuff too, so don't worry about what happens, and then we're going to explain all of that. So when I press enter, what I want you to realize is that here it says here are the numbers I read into the array, 52, 93, 5, 43, and looks like we've got the correct numbers. And then I also found the largest number and all that, which we'll get to. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to do was to find the largest value into this from this list that's in my array. And through that, essentially with methods, we discussed how to create a method that performs a specific action. In this case, I have a method called findMax. It accepts an array called num, and it also accepts the number of items. Because in order to find the maximum of a bunch of numbers, I have to essentially compare these numbers together and identify the largest value. Of course, there are different algorithms of doing that, but I'm going to show you a very simple algorithm to find the maximum. But what's important here is the concept of using a method to do this. Findmax is the name of the method. It accepts 2 parameters. It's going to return a value because notice I'm putting it equal to another variable. And if you just had to guess, largest is an int. So this findMax also better be int because they have to match. So my program goes to findMax. Of course, again, we have to write the definition of findMax. I'm going to print the largest value because it's going to come back with that. And then here's another example that we'll talk about shortly. So ignore all of these for now. I'm just going to scroll to the definition of the method findMax. The only thing that you have to be very careful about is, of course, public static is, we already talked about this. These are some keywords that you put in. Int means that the function, or in this case the method, is going to return a value. FindMax is the name of the method. And here's what I said that could be tricky is that with methods that we covered earlier, we didn't have arrays being passed to a method. No worries. All you have to do is right after the name of the array, put a pair of open and close brackets. And then n items is this. Of course, remember that these names, num and items, don't have to be this. You could call it anything you like because the only thing that Java is going to do or to care about is the number of arguments and the type of arguments. If they match, we're good. So again, so one real simple algorithm is I create a variable called large, and I say large is num sub 0. So if I go back to my example, large right now is 52. So I'm going to say, well, this is the largest value. Then I'm just going to look at the next value and say, well, is this bigger than 52? Well, just looking at this example, 93 is bigger than 52. So I'm going to make large equals to 93. Then I'm going to check, is 5 bigger than 93? No. Is 43 bigger than 93? No. And then I reach the end of my items. So the loop is going to exit. And what is the value stored in large? Obviously is 93, which is the correct answer. So notice all we have is a for loop that starts from 1 because I already said num sub 0 is 1. I just want to go ahead and start comparing the next item. And I'm comparing it to large. If num sub I is bigger than large, large is num sub I. That's it. That's all it takes to find the maximum of a number in a series of numbers. Of course, as soon as I change this to less than, then I can find the lowest number. So if you can, I suppose, extrapolate from this, you can easily create another method named find min and do exactly the same thing, just changing this to a less than, and you'll have the minimum value. Notice again, because this is a function, again, I keep saying function, but in Java we call them methods. As soon as you have a method that returns a value, you better have this return statement. Now remember that methods can only have a return statement executed once. So you could have various if statements and return different values based on the if statement, but you can only have one return statement executed. So I can't go back in here and do return large again because you get an error message because you can only execute one return statement. Okay, so notice when I started the program here, find max, it's going to take my array num and number of items, which is 4. It's going to go in here and make this one-to-one correspondence. It's going to go through my loop and calculate the large and return large. And remember, the largest value was 93. So 93 is going to be the value of find max. And of course, the whole thing now is 93. So it's essentially, I'm saying largest equals 93, which is good because obviously the numbers change. And of course, anytime I run this code, given different numbers, I get different maximum value. So here I'm just printing the largest value. By the way, I could have just said system.out.println find max num comma and items. That would have worked exactly the same way. This way, at least I have this variable that I could use in different methods or use in different parts of the program. So anytime a function returns a value, store it. Store its value somewhere because then if you need to use it, you don't have to call the method again. Here's another example. This is just a way to string, well, the name of the array is names because it's got brackets, so I know it's an array. And it's string data type, meaning that it can hold any string of characters. And I use a curly brace or a brace or a curly bracket. Because they're strings, I'll have to put them inside quotations. By the way, if I could have had a variable int numbers, and then I'll just put in 1, 2, 3 if I wanted to, or any numbers I want to initialize the array with. So what this does is that because you have 3 items, it's going to create an array with 3 elements. This is element 0, this is element 1, and this is element 2. So 1 goes into 0th element, first and second. Now, what do you think I'm doing here? I have a loop. Now, by the way, anytime you have arrays, for loops are perfect to use with them because you know the beginning and the end. And of course, you could use a while loop if you wanted to. But in this case, for loops are a lot more convenient. So z is just my index. Of course, I could have named it anything I like. And z stars is 0. Now, notice I have a property or an attribute called length. We'll talk about object-oriented programming in a couple of weeks. So some of this stuff is going to make a lot more sense in 2 weeks. But all this is telling me is that go call essentially all arrays in Java have this property called length, which essentially gives you the length of the array. I could have just said 3 here, but if I already have this, why not use it? Because if I go in here and add another variable, or another value, then I don't have to change these numbers. So name.length in this case is going to be 3. So my indices are going to be 0, 1, and 2, which is good. Again, one common mistake is to put an equal sign in there. And as you can tell, you're going to have problems because you're going to um, access a memory location that doesn't exist. So be very careful with this less than versus less than or equal. So as you can tell, I'm going to print the content. So the first print statement is name sub 0. That's the variable or the constant 1, O-N-E. Then it's going to go back in 2 and then 3. So this print statement essentially is going to print 1, 2, 3, 1 per line. Now what I'm trying to do here is I'm going to display each character of this string one item per line. Now, if you remember from the from reading characters that we talked about a few weeks ago, there's a method called char at that you give it the location, it gives you the value at that location. And char at, of course, always goes with a string. So what I want to do is I want to be able to access the character at position 0, and then 1, and then 2. And then same thing, 0, 1, 2, and so on. So I want to do this character by character, and I want to print it one character per line. That's why I use a print line, println. So let's look at this outer loop. It starts from 0 and goes to names.length. Notice I'm just saying names.length. This is the name of my array. And as you might expect, or as we just talked about, names.length is equal to 3 because there's 3 elements in here. Inside this loop, I have another variable, obviously, say s equals to 0, and it goes to names sub z. Well, what is names sub z? Well, when z is 0, names sub z is going to be names sub 0. And what is name sub 0? The string O-N-E. And the length of that, now notice this length has a pair of parentheses around it, so which essentially tells you that when you're referring to the strings for the length, you have to use a method, and that's why you use a pair of parentheses. So the good thing about this is that regardless of how big this character, this string is, or this string, or this string, this method always returns the length of the string. And s++, of course, goes to the next character. And all I'm saying is give me name sub 0, that means this, dot character at s, which is 0, so it's going to give me O. Then it's going to go back, s is now equal to 1. Is 1 less than 3? That's the length of this. The answer is yes. So it will display name sub z. Remember, z is still 0. So name sub 0, which is this string. Character at location 1, which is the n right there. And then it does the E, and then it goes to gets out of the loop, it prints next, and then goes back and start the same process, now making z equal to 1, which means that I'm processing this string. And of course, it will stop when we get to the consume all of the elements of that string. So let's compile this thing. I don't know if I made any changes. I didn't. So Control 2. So here I'm just going to put in 12, 34, negative 900, 87. And it's going to, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm done. Well, I don't want to give you, here's 987, 56, or 65. 0. So we know the max is going to be 987. So I have to scroll up a little bit. So this is my data that it printed. This is the maximum value, 987. 123 is being printed because I printed it, I believe, right there, name sub z. This is the content on my string. And then ONE, so it's one character at a time. Next is going to be TWO, and then THREE, and then end of code. Now, let's go in here and just add hello there, right? So that's it. I just added another variable, another, keep saying variable, another constant to this array. And because I used my parameter, my attributes of the array and the length method of strings, I don't have to change anything in this code. So let's just run it. Control 2, and then I'm going to say 1, 2, and 0, just to keep it simple. And notice hello there also came in as my output. Of course, these names could also be read or input from the user, or later we'll talk about data files, so they could come in from a file. Now, one last thing, I think let's just see this one. Take a look at this. These series of statements, what do they do? It looks like they take a string of, or an array of strings, and they just write them one character at a time on the screen. Can I make a method out of this? And of course, the answer is, well, why not? So I'm just going to do a Control C so that we would keep it. And then I'm going to uh, comment it um, so that you can see it, and then I'll delete it later. So essentially, instead of all of these statements, all I'm going to do is I'm going to call a function, a method called print one per, let's say one char per line. I know it's kind of lengthy, but that's what I'm going to do, right? That's the name of the method. This method is only going to print stuff. It's not going to return a value, so that's why I'm not making an assignment. So obviously it's going to be a void method. And what does it need? Well, it needs an array called names, so I'll give it names. And does it need anything else? Doesn't look like it because everything else is contained in here. So there, print one character per line, give it the array names, and it's gonna do its thing. And of course, the only thing I have to do is I have to go and define this thing. So I already have this. So let me just take that. So I'm going to move right over here again. Remember the order of how you type these methods is irrelevant. Public static void. Remember this is void. This one was int, and it was called print one character. What type of data is it? A string. It is a just like this one, followed by the name. I'll just call it name, bracket, bracket, and that's it. Here's the beginning, here's the end. I'm going to put the comment there so I know where the beginning and the end is. And this is what I want to copy, right? Well, maybe then I can just grab all of this from here. I don't need these anymore. And I just want to go in here and paste it. There you go. Now the only thing is, looks like everything is self-contained within this method. I don't need to pass it any other parameters, S and Z are local variables. And I have a good feeling that this might actually compile. So let's Control 1. Ooh, it didn't. And it says names. So I suppose I did that intentionally, I suppose. So what's the problem? This is names. I go in here, and this is right there. The variable that I'm referring to is names. Here I chose to do name. Now, Remember, you can go in here and change these names to just name or just add S right there. Now, this program should compile. So again, they just have to match, that's all. So control 1, and okay, it worked. And I suppose then the answer should be exactly the same as before. So I'm going to do 1 and a 2 and a 0. And sure enough, everything works exactly the same way as before. So what I showed you here essentially is the concept of an array. We loaded a bunch of numbers into an array. We wrote a method to find the largest value, and we create an array of strings, and we wrote the content of each string, one character per line. Showed you some basic stuff about, or basic information about arrays, and essentially showed you how to create a method from existing code. And I believe this is it. I just want to show you one more thing. It says enter a whole number to save into array. I'm just going to put in 12, 34, 5, 1, 2, 3. I'm just going to put in a bunch of numbers and 798 and 12 again. Well, maybe 120, doesn't matter. And notice I get this error exception in thread main, array index out of bounds exception. Why? Notice it does tell you 10. The reason is that you created the array with 10 elements, but you try to give it 11 numbers and it fails. Or put another way, you are trying to put in a value in num sub 10, which does not exist. So anytime you get this error message, chances are that you have an array index. You just went over the boundaries of your array. So I hope this was helpful. Oh, by the way, before I move, this number here can also be entered by the user. So you can ask the user how many numbers they want to enter and then make this a variable. And then again, 2 or 3 weeks from now, we'll talk about a different type of array in Java where you don't have to actually tell it upfront how many elements the array will hold. We'll be able to dynamically create the array and just keep adding numbers or strings or other objects to it. But that's a little bit later. Okay, I hope this helps. I will put this file along with the video recording in Canvas. Hope this helps. Let me know or post any questions that you have about this particular video or anything else in Canvas. Okay, have a good day or good night, depending on when you view this recording.